project that's part of the U.S. Department of Energy. We're all veterans in remote work, having done this for long before the coronavirus crisis started. So we thought we'd start off with some introductory remarks here from the panelists, and then after that move to questions. So just a little bit of an overview of who we are on the project. So we are staff members at the U.S. Department of Energy laboratories. This map here shows the facilities and across the United States. We're also all associated with the U.S. Department of Energy's Exascale Computing Project, which has as part of it a productivity and sustainability project that's in a sense the foundation for this particular activity. Of course, we're involved in a lot of activities, including some of the efforts going on, with the COVID-19 efforts for the nation. How we're going to start is we'll have introductions from the panelists. We have these 4 prompts that we've asked them to talk to a little bit, and then we'll move to a Q&A. We have a Google Doc where you can enter your questions, and Ashley Barker, who's helping with the moderation, will then ask them, and then we would like, if you're comfortable, asking the question yourself. So we will call upon you to state your question yourself, part of the participation. Also, if you want to get the slides or the bios from today, they're available at this link. So let's get started. Mike Bernhardt, you want to kick us off, please?
Sure, thank you, Mike. Can folks see the slides? Because I'm not seeing the slides on my screen.
I can.
Yes.
I'm not the right.
I can.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Bernhardt. I'm the communications lead for the Exascale Computing Project. In a prior life, I ran a virtual marketing, public relations, advertising agency for over 2 decades. And all of our employees were remote, working from their home offices. It was a little bit different for us in that we hired people specifically knowing that they were going to be working from their homes at a time when it was pretty much unheard of in the marketing and communications side of the industry. So that's where I'm coming from, my perspective. And for those of you who are coming from a typical working environment, working in an office, the advice is kind of tailored to kind of helping you understand some of the nuances of transitioning over to that new environment, which is now in your home. So the first thing that I have to say is, don't think of your work at home situation as the fact that, wow, I'm at home each day. This is really cool, but maybe I should try to get some work done. Think of it more as every single day, I'm at work, but at least I don't have far to commute. There's a big benefit to it. In this environment, discipline is paramount, absolutely. You must make that mental transition, that mental leap each day. Get up in the morning, have your breakfast. If you're a breakfast person, get a shower, get dressed, and go to your office. That office might be a designated office in your home, dedicated. It might be sitting at a dining room table, might be sitting in a closet. Whatever that office is, think of that as your work environment. And once you go there, you're no longer at home. Make that mental leap. Now, for quite some time, I had employees, we would help them get their offices set up, but some of them didn't have the room for a typical home office. And they would make a mobile cart with their computer and their monitor at the time and all the supplies that they needed. So at the end of the day, when they were actually going home again, they could just cover up that cart, roll it aside, put it out of the way and forget about it and be back in their home environment. So the mental leap is an important first step. The challenges that I've experienced in that regard is the realization that working from home is not for everyone. Some employees just simply didn't adapt to the environment. Keep that in mind. If you're a supervisor, don't let your employees, your team members feel lost. Stay in close contact with them. folks might start to feel lonely, a little bit disconnected from the rest of the team. So teams need to force a little bit more interaction, let's say, in this kind of an environment, and make sure that everyone is involved and feeling like they're still part of a working team. The other item that Mike asked us to think about was unforeseen benefits out of these environments. For me personally, it was learning the art of brevity. I like to talk, and I like to talk, typically sometimes too much. So it wasn't brevity in terms of the shortness of time, but brevity as in concise and exact use of words. You no longer have that luxury of saying, hey, Mike, could you help me do this? Could you take care of this? With Mike being right down the hall or in a close office, and Mike coming back and saying, now you meant this, right? Or you want me to do it this way. Spell out what you need very clearly, very concisely in your email communications, in your chats when you're going back and forth with a teleconferencing system, and try to get it right the first time. That will help quite a bit in keeping the frustration levels down, I believe. And then the opportunities that you can look for from an experience like this, time not commuting is really valuable. Take advantage of it. It's more time with your family, more time for personal things that you have to do. Count your blessings. It really does, change the way that you can look at life. My final thoughts on the work from home experience is, first of all, these teleconferencing, video conferencing tools, Zoom, Blue Jeans, Teams, whatever you're using, it's just another tool. Take the time, if you're a team leader, to make sure that your people know how to use it comfortably. A lot of people balk at the use of the tools because they're not familiar with them. So get everyone comfortable with all the functionality of these tools. And, from a personal level, take it on as any challenge that you had in the past of learning new tools at work. So get comfortable with them. That will help tremendously. And the last one is video etiquette. When you're on video conference calls, be aware, one of the first rules that I've always had with my employees, and one of the first rules I think most of us should observe, is don't eat when you're on camera. It's never pretty. So think about the video etiquette and what people are seeing, and be kind to them. Microphone off when you're not talking, things like that. That's about it for me. That's all I have, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, moving on. Lois Turfman-McInnes. Go ahead, Lois.
Sure. I am a computational scientist at Argonne National Laboratory. I have worked at Argonne since 1993, right after I finished graduate school in applied mathematics. I started as a postdoc, worked on site for a number of years until I started primarily working remotely in the year 2000. So I have been primarily working remotely for 20 years. And during that time, I also frequently visited the lab regularly to meet in person with my collaborators, and also traveled to workshops, conferences, other project meetings to meet in person with my collaborators. So my experience during the past 20 years is somewhat different than what we're all experiencing now, where none of us are traveling at all, and we're all at home. So I recognize that all of the advice that you're hearing from us now, we need to frame in the context of life as it is right now, which is admittedly quite different from anything any of us have experienced previously. I believe it's very important, as Mike Bernhardt mentioned, to stay in touch with your collaborators and your other colleagues. It's very important to be proactive in communicating. I think each of us has choices we can make, no matter what role we play in any given project, about how we may choose to communicate with others. So I encourage all of us to think about that, think about choices that can help us stay in touch. But yet at the same time, we need to make sure that we preserve for ourselves time for thinking and deep work. I know it's been a challenge for me in recent weeks, since we have so much more online communication that can take up the bulk of the time that I'm alert and paying attention. So I need to be very careful to carve out time to think deeply. And for me, oftentimes I've been a morning person, so I've tended to focus on important tasks where I need to focus and think early in the day. Challenges that I've experienced firsthand are ergonomics related. I encourage all of us to pay attention to appropriate desk height, chair height, keyboard height, and not to pay too much attention to comfortably sitting on our sofas and other seating areas in our homes that perhaps are fine for a few hours on the weekend, but really not where we should be sitting for 8 hours a day. I encountered a pinched nerve about 10 years ago that snuck up on me without any advanced warning, and it took a long time to get past it. I did get past it, but really do pay attention to ergonomics. Also take breaks to move around. That's very important. I believe that all of us have opportunities to benefit from this time to build our skills in collaborating in a distributed way. And given the unique circumstances of our time, while we're doing this at home with other family members, to do it in a way that helps us build up our ability to focus and to be very efficient with what we're doing. And thus, as a community, I believe that we have opportunities to come up with more effective ways for doing our collaborative computational science, where each of us is working in some team, at least one team, but often many of us are working in multiple distributed teams. So I believe in the coming weeks, we'll have opportunities to do some advancing in our own practices that will help us even later after this crisis subsides. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. Let's move on. Mark Miller.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Miller, a computer scientist at Livermore Labs. I'm not actually speaking to you from the machine room at Livermore Labs. I'm just using a feature of Zoom to put that picture behind me, because if it wasn't there, you'd see a very messy office. I live in Davis, which is about 100 miles north of Livermore Labs. I've lived here my whole career at Livermore, and I've been very fortunate that the lab has had a very flexible number of flexible work options, including a work at home policy. So under normal circumstances, I would be commuting down to Livermore once a week, typically, sometimes twice a week, and then working at home the other days. And I've been doing that for close to 10 years now. And this echoes some of the earlier comments you've already heard. As far as advice, maintaining a normal work schedule, I agree with others. That's very important. Waking at the same time, taking breaks, getting your meals, off hours, and of course, getting plenty of sleep. And I really believe in having a work area that's sort of, if it's logistically possible, separate from everything else, and you close it off when you're not at work. Even if all you have is a desk where your laptop is somewhere in your living room, throw a sheet over it or a blanket and turn the screen and sound off. So when you're not at work, it's sort of out of your psyche and out of your mind. I think that's a really important thing to try to do. Also think it's important to look for the humor in things. That's why I went and found this little cartoon that I thought was kind of funny and perhaps relevant. The challenges we run into, I think we all potentially have the challenges of interruptions from others you live with. It turns out for me, it's just me and my wife here, so we don't have issues potentially with kids or pets or perhaps older family members living with us, but that can definitely be a challenge. And then for me personally, too much snacking. The kitchen's literally right around the corner and out of my office, and I just really have to be careful that I'm not doing too much snacking. Unforeseen benefits. So with respect to the interruption issue, there's fewer interruptions from your coworkers. People popping by your office to say, I don't know how to do X or Y, or I'm running into a problem with your software. I work on Visit, so it would often be a Visit user saying, I'm having trouble, can you help? So those interruptions are certainly less in a remote working situation. And as far as opportunities to learn from this experience is learning new technologies and learning skills for the remote interaction. For example, using teleconference software for pair programming. Turns out I've done that a lot in the last few years, and it's very useful, very powerful. So that's it for me, Mike.
Thank you, Mark. All right, moving on. Catherine.
Hey there. I'm Catherine Moore from Livermore Lab, and I've been working at home part-time for about 20 years too. The first 10 years of that was when I was a student, and I worked at home because I had school-age children, and so I needed to be home for them. And so now that I'm out of school, my situation is that I live in Portland, Oregon, but my workplace is in California. So So I split my time between those two locations. Let's see, for advice, most of my points echo those that have already been brought up, having a dedicated space for working. If you can swing it, make sure you pick your work hours and stick to them. And I also want to really emphasize taking breaks. I think it's a very important thing to do. You would do it at the workplace, so you should do it at your home workplace too. And one thing that's been a challenge for me, even though my children are grown up, I still have my husband here, is having a way to indicate when I'm on the phone or on video so that embarrassing situations don't happen. And I have found that just closing my door is not enough. I need to tie something to the doorknob that's bright and shiny that says, please don't come in. And so that might be effective for you too. The biggest challenges for me were increased stress. I know people think working at home is more relaxing. I actually sometimes find it more stressful. I feel like sometimes I always have to be online, emails, and available by phone because of the impression that maybe my bosses, if they can't see me, they don't think I'm working. And I have found that's not true. You know, as long as you're available in sort of predictable hours, that is just fine. One that was surprising to me and also took me a while to figure out is that I find voice-only communication pretty stressful. Apparently, I'm one of these people that gets a lot of information from facial expressions, from gestures, from body language, about how someone is interpreting what I'm saying, whether they are, confused or, really enthusiastic or maybe not even listening at all. And so you might be one of these people too. And so I would suggest turning on video. I find that to be really helpful. Another one is that I feel that maybe my career has been slower from working at home, and this will, really be dependent on your workplace culture, depending on how many people actually work from home and how your management is used to that. But I did find that when I changed my work schedule so that I was on site more often, that my career did better just from being present and people seeing of me and thinking of me for opportunities. Benefits, I have trouble listening to very long telecoms, and so I'm better able to focus if I'm not in front of my screens. And so it's a great opportunity to do something mindless, like, pulling weeds in your garden, or maybe going for a walk, or folding laundry, whatever, getting more done, and also better able to focus on the technical content of the call I'm on. No commute, so more time with family, more downtime. And I also have better exercise habits. When you're working at home, it doesn't really matter what you look like most of the time. So if you have a free hour, you can take off, go exercise, and come right back. And I find that I fit that in better than I do when I'm on site. In terms of opportunities, just as Mark was saying, when you're on site, there's a whole lot of people knocking on your door, a lot of times stopping by to talk about the weather or ask you how to do something or to fix something. And I sometimes find that annoying because I was like, gosh darn, I can't get any work done. But turns out I really miss that. So I think it's an opportunity to have a growing appreciation for things you really do like about work that maybe you didn't appreciate before.
Thanks, Catherine. Elaine.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So welcome everybody. My name is Elaine Rayborn, and I am a social scientist from Sandia National Laboratories. My background is in intercultural communication and human-computer interaction. And it's my work in virtual teams and in collaborative virtual environments that took me as a fellow out to Europe to work in the UK and in Germany and France for a few years. And so what I bring in terms of my experience to this conversation is collaborating with different cultures across time zones, working as a person who's been working remotely for 14 years, usually in departments that are co-located. So that has its own set of challenges. But so that's the perspective that I'm going to bring to what I'm going to talk about today. And actually, what I would just like to mention is I'm going to, we've heard a lot of great advice. And so I think I'll focus on is really more of the attitude that we need to bring to working remotely, in particular in the context of this unique environment of imposed virtual work or imposed and unplanned remote working. And so in terms of the attitude that we really want to bring to our work now is think about being intentional, inclusive, and open to outcome. And so in terms of advice that I would have with regard to attitudes that we want to bring, I think that being a team player is really important, in particular if you're working remotely. And if you are leading a team, you really have to think about the ways that you may want to lead that are different from the ways that you might have led a co-located team. And so this is where intentionality becomes really important. As a team player, help out. Don't think that certain roles are just really designated for certain people. Really, it's about bringing the team together, about everybody pulling their weight. And certainly leadership is also about modeling those behaviors. And in particular, behaviors that can be modeled and are seen are those that are persistent in the digital environment. And so we will leave digital footprints. Think about that. Think about how all of the technologies can be persistent and how you can use them to be more collaborative in the work that you're doing. And so this really speaks to also knowing the pros and cons of this communication. And so really look at when is synchronous communication more applicable than asynchronous communication? Or how can I use them together in a complementary way? Because what you'll want to do is make sure that your messages, key decision points are repeated across different communication modalities, so that if someone hasn't been present, they can find a way to keep up with that information. So some of these challenges that I've experienced have centered around motivating and building trust and rapport when you are actually dispersed. And it does require a different perspective. For example, I may have meetings and then follow up with individuals when I feel like there's something else that they could have said that they didn't get to say during a meeting. And so it requires really learning how to listen a little differently, or listen for inclusion. And actually, if you do need results, let's say you're not getting the results out of meetings, think about changing your approach, but also negotiating the approach of the meeting with those in the meeting. You'll find that your team members will have a lot of great ideas about how to conduct meetings. And the key here is to make that particular time that you have together very useful and relevant to everyone. And so it might mean that you incorporate new technologies. Instead of thinking about a meeting where everybody's sitting around a table, maybe you've got your notebooks out, you've got your computer technology with you. So think about collaborative note-taking or recording meetings, making sure that those that aren't there are also included. There's a lot we can do. And I think that these are one of the, these are some of the unforeseen benefits. Really, my colleagues have talked about learning new skills. I really think it's an opportunity to unlearn old habits as well. So think about things that you might normally do that aren't really working for you in the virtual environment, and think about how you might want to adapt that. So the opportunities that I would propose are just fantastic for us in this new environment of working remotely, would be really new perspectives about diversity and inclusion, about what it means to be productive. We will have an opportunity to really stretch our boundaries and to find out what productive means to us, and what the best productivity algorithm, I guess, is for us. And since we're all unique, it's all going to be different. And so coming up with a team productivity, a sense of productivity, is really important. And then finally, I would suggest that if you find that you're making changes and you like those changes, keep them as we move out of this environment and into, go back to work, maybe back in our organizations. Let's push on business as usual and challenge those assumptions and keep what's really working. That I think is key to really understanding what the opportunities are in this particular environment. And that's all I have, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. That's very nice. We wanted to just mention also some resources beyond what we're discussing here. So I mentioned the Ideas Project, and Better Scientific Software is a portal that is in part sponsored by Ideas. You can find some curated content there. There's plenty of good material online. In fact, when we originally got started trying to think of ways that we might be able to help people as they transition to working remotely, we thought, well, let's write some content. And then we went looking online, and there's just all sorts of really good stuff out there. So we thought we'd rather curate what's out there toward things that are maybe more accessible or interesting to scientific communities, and then have this kind of panel session where it can be Q&A. But please go ahead and look at bssw.io for content that will could help you make this transition. So that is the end of our prepared comments. Let me mention one more time to put your name and a question in the Google Doc Q&A link. We prefer not to use the Zoom chat if possible, because we were finding that the chat can be used for chat, and if we have questions, we can put them in this Google Doc. And then we will ask you to state your question when we call your name, and it'd be nice to hear you say it. And also in terms of finding humor and things, I think we heard about 176 doorbells ring when we were entering, but I figured out how to stop it. So hopefully we won't have any more. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing slides here so then we can see people's faces as they chat, or their green phone.
So I've noticed that some people got started writing questions in the doc earlier, which is awesome. I would ask those of you who haven't already put your name with your question to please go back into the Google Doc and add your name. That will help us follow up with you as we go. Thank you. Ashley, are you going to lead our question session?
Yep, I think we'll start with a question from Noel. Noel, if you can unmute and you want to ask your question to Mark about his experience with pair programming. Do you want to ask that, or I can do it on your behalf?
Sure. I had a question about specific guidance around collaborating virtually, which I guess is a separate question at this point. And then the second one is are there examples of where virtual collaboration is actually stronger than in-person collaboration? And Mark gave a great answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to, I'll follow up. I'll just say, over the course of the last few years, I've probably introduced, maybe a couple of dozen Livermore Labs employees to WebEx who are customers of mine or users of mine for different software that I develop. And since I'm working from home, they ask me, how do I do X, or I'm running into a problem with Y. I sent them a teleconference link and an email, and initially there's a little bit of jostling around to get audio and video set up. It's their first time using WebEx. But after 10 or 15 minutes of that, I'm looking at their screen, and it's like I'm in their office, and I can switch from one user to another in short order. I don't have to walk between buildings. So I'm echoing, I think, comments that Quincy Koziel made the last time we did this, that actually pair programming in that environment is significantly easier, to be quite honest. So that's just one example.
Anyone
Noel,
else?
do you have any follow-up questions to that?
No, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Mark.
No, that's great. Go for it, Ashley.
All right. So the next person I'd like to call on is Kyle Felker. Kyle, do you want to ask your question? Just so everyone knows, I think if you open the participant list, you should be able to take yourself off of mute.
I think, can you hear me? You can hear me now, right?
I can hear you,
Yes.
Yeah,
Kyle.
go for it.
Great.
So there's so many options for whiteboard apps and, built into the various chat mechanisms, but I was just curious if people have certain ones that they could recommend, especially when you have a tablet, which I'm getting used to and is a bit of a nightmare at first.
Well, I can say, this is my crew, that Zoom has a decent whiteboard app where you can do shared scribbling or writing on the screen. If you have an iPad, it's actually really handy in my experience, both for work and for fun. I've played tic-tac-toe and hangman with my grandkids using that. Was just a blast, especially now that we can't go see them.
Any other panelists have some other alternatives?
This is Lois. I haven't worked with whiteboard writing, but I will say that I've used Google Docs for collaborative real-time editing and taking notes during discussions, and found that to be very effective for text-based work.
Anyone else?
So I know the Better Scientific Software site actually took this question up just within the last week, and we were looking for some resources online. We found one link. There are others. I'm going to try to post out into the document, into the Google Doc that may be useful as far as some of the whiteboard software. There's a couple of articles out there that evaluated some of the whiteboard software, and I'll try to post that into the Google Doc.
All right, thank you. So next, I'd like to move to Evan Felix. Evan, would you be able to unmute and ask your question? If not, I can ask it on your behalf.
Yeah, I can do it. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you great, thank you.
So I was just going to ask Catherine and maybe the other panelists, but I do those things too sometimes where I've got two things going on. How do you deal with, like you were saying, just when you're on a web conference, you've got, you're doing something mindless. How do you deal with when people come up and talk and suddenly there's this third thing that they really want? Some of your mind, they actually think about something suddenly and you've got two other things going on still.
Well, I guess, I'm always on mute if I'm not talking. So if someone comes up and talks to me, it's not embarrassing. Maybe I have a really mean look on my face if my husband comes up to me. Usually if he sees my headphones in my ears, he knows I'm on a phone call if I'm doing something else. Yeah, I just try to shut it down. I guess I'm not very nice. If you have children, that's a lot harder.
So I have a thought that you might be able to use. Maybe you and your family can agree that if you have a certain artifact with you, that it means that you're on a work call. So I don't know, maybe if you've got your earbuds in, that means that you're working. Something that they can see that signals to them, oh, okay, now's not a good time.
One thing that I've done over the years, and I don't have to do this so much anymore, but when I had young kids, I got in the habit of telling my kids, even though my office, I've done this for 23 years, and even though I'm down in my office, that's a short walk down the steps to get to my office from the main floor of the house, I had them call me on my phone rather than come and knock or look. And that helped to create in their mind this separation that, your dad's at work. So if I want to talk to him, I have to call him on the phone. And that actually, I think, helped. It set in their mind a model that, there's a distance between us that's mental as well as, even though it's maybe not so far physical, it's mental.
All right, anyone else before we move to the next question?
Well, I just had another thought, which was that, so we're thinking about people coming and interrupting you while you're working. So maybe you could take a break at certain times and meet up with your family for lunch, or make an appointment with each other so that you're taking breaks, you're getting away from your desk, you're walking around, and you're spending time with your family. So that might actually minimize some of those interruptions as well.
This is Lois. Actually, that's a great suggestion. In my introductory remarks, I mentioned that our circumstances now where we're all at home are quite different from what I experienced previously. This is one example. I have two daughters. They're now ages 16 and 19. I've worked remotely from the time they were infants through their teenage years now. And I will say that I have more unusual opportunities for interruption now during these past few weeks when we're all home than I ever did, probably in my last 20 years combined. And we indeed have negotiated, as I'm spending many of my days on the phone, we've negotiated for 30-minute blocks when I'm available to talk to them. So that's something that's different and new for me, but it may be useful. Also, I will say that my strategies for effective working remotely have changed over time as my children have been different ages. So I think that all of us who are dealing with family members at home need to think carefully about what works for our circumstances now. And there certainly will be as many different effective approaches as there are people and jobs that you have in environments where you're hanging out now. So don't feel like we need a one-size-fits-all solution.
I'll just add on a little bit. One of the challenges that I've had is that you know, I sit at my computer when I'm working at home. I'm at my computer in my office, you know, all day. Sometimes I will take my computer into the couch when I'm just like tired of my office and sit in the couch in the living room and sit there and work. And then later on, I might actually be doing some reading or whatever online that is no longer work. But my wife sees that and she thinks, well, he's still at work because he's got his laptop in his lap. And then that might lead to an argument. No, I'm not working at all. I'm actually, and sometimes, most of the time that's true. but yeah, that's why having that space separate and trying to maintain that, I think the discipline that Mike mentions really, it's difficult, but very useful.
Thank you. So I think we'll move to the next question from Pedro. I think I've seen this a couple of times now in the question. So Pedro, could you unmute and ask your question, or are we happy to do it for you?
He's saying he doesn't have a mic.
So I will ask on his. Yep. Okay. So Pedro's question is, due to the nature of the work at national laboratories, where in some cases we work with classified materials or classified work, how can we establish a standing remote working environment?
Well, so this is Mark at Livermore. We do obviously a lot of classified work at Livermore. I'm not aware of any home office situation where you can do anything that's classified. That's just, you can't do it. You have to be on site in the various secure communication protocols that they provide specifically for that. So you may have been touching on something maybe that's not so much classified, but sensitive information, whether it's things like NDA, if you're involved in a conversation that involves NDA or OUO or other things, then yeah, the tools need to have some support for that. And to be honest, I'm not familiar with the features, but maybe others can speak to, you know, how well these tools support those kinds of sensitive information.
Within the US Exascale project, you know, we have certain information policies that we have to satisfy. And, you know, for example, our information has to be hosted on what's called a .gov cloud, meaning all the resources are within the United States. There has to be a certain degree of encryption and, you know, other kinds of security issues. But generally, we found that the major tools for remote conferencing, things like BlueJeans, Zoom, WebEx, and so on, have those they have configurations that comply with the policies. So, you know, it's not classified, as Mark said. I know of no way if you're doing truly classified work, that you can do anything other than go in behind the fence and satisfy the protocols of that. But if you're doing other, less sensitive kinds of work, these platforms can do it.
I would say, yeah, they're absolutely right. You can't do any classified work outside of being on site, but you can have impact on programmatic work in an unclassified context. And so I would say it would take effort on your part to, when you are on site, make as many contacts as you can, get as much information as you can on how what you're doing in the open can have impact. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, that's a great comment. We have often team configurations and work classification such that unclassified work can inform or be useful to a classified environment. The most concrete example is some of our software library software implementations, where there's a portion of that lives even in the open source. Trilinos is a project I've worked on for a long time. The bulk of its software is available on GitHub, but it's all unclassified. It's strictly designed to be available openly, but then it can be used within classified settings and still impact that kind of environment.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move next to Maureen Daughtery. I hope I got that right. Maureen, do you have a microphone?
Yes, I do.
Awesome, great.
Right. So I'm just really trying to figure out how to manage and monitor productivity in a positive way so that we can produce the proper outcome, just making sure work gets done. I know when we were on-prem, there were occasions when staff weren't necessarily as productive as I would like, and that's when they're right in front of me. So how do we do that in a positive manner to make it more productive? Any ideas?
This is Lois. I have worked remotely in collaborative teams for a long time, and so our processes and practices for distributed collaborative teams have been, from my point of view, effective throughout time, and that is sort of planning and engagement for communicating effectively, involving people in the ways that Elaine described. It would be interesting to know more what specific setting and kinds of teams that you're working with in order to address your specific question more precisely.
We were frontline support for on-prem cluster. So just trying to get people to address their tickets and the work that was in front of them sometimes could have been challenging, especially if it was complicated or just something they didn't have interest in.
Yeah, that's a hard situation.
Is it possible to break the work items down into smaller pieces? So if they're challenging or not desirable, I know some people are motivated by being able to tick things off, and complete things. So if there's a larger number of small ones that don't seem so, overwhelming, maybe they would be easier to tackle.
I mean, that would make sense. And then sometimes we were able to do that, but that wasn't always the case. Sometimes it was just they were not motivated. So it's a matter of, if I was having difficulty motivating on-prem, how do you motivate when it's from home? Yeah. And how do you monitor some of these things too? And I don't know if you've ever heard.
So one of the things that I've done over the years is created, dashboards, project dashboards, and you can do this in a variety of tools. GitHub supports it, GitLab, Trello, those kinds of tools, or maybe on premises you have things like Atlassian products where you can create issues and then put up something with something called like a Kanban board, where you have things that are to do, in progress, and done was the simplest form of board. And then you can see immediately the status of activities, and then you can put concrete work statements, what's expected into the issues. And we use it, for example, in the ECP leadership team, or all of our leaders are very busy people, And so what we do is we put all the content that they need in order to get a task done, all the links, all the instructions, what they're expected to do into that issue, so that when they have time to do it, everything is there. They don't have to go look through their email first. Oh, what was I really supposed to do? What resource do I need? It's all in that ticket and that issue, and then they can get it done. And then move it across the board, and that can be very useful. Sometimes if we don't have a chance to meet on a regular basis, I'll tell people, update your Kanban board, your issues, so we can see the status of things and then correspond remotely. It improves communication. Like Mike Bernhardt said, communicating, you have to be a lot more precise about what you're asking. And then it also provides a little bit of social pressure in that everybody sees this board and the status of things. And so that, I don't know, those are just a few thoughts.
I think a dashboard might be interesting.
Yeah, I found them to be incredibly useful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I would like to call next on Thoraya. I hope I got your name right. About teaching after the coronavirus. Are you able to speak?
Yeah, hi everyone. So this is Thoraya from Bahrain. I am a teacher, and as you notice with the coronavirus, suddenly we wake up, we have to go online. So my issue is that I'm teaching, by the way, mathematics. So how can I motivate myself, motivate my students behind, through this computer screen? I have no idea if they are following me. They are not, active with me. So I find it difficult, and they also the experience, because suddenly we move to Teams, and we have to know all the technology. Everything's behind Teams, which again new, and we have syllabus. So how we can tackle this issue? We want, everyone want us to learn, me and my students, and to communicate, to give them information, which I find it really difficult. In the class, especially I got this class after the coronavirus, so I have no idea about the students. I think if I met them before face to face and then we move to online, maybe things will be easier, but then suddenly I met them online, and I don't know their faces as all. Second things, just regarding some people were mentioning about sitting at home and working. From my experience now, because me and all my family are sitting at home, so we have two teachers, one at school level, me at the university level. I have my niece consultant in a company, and I have two students. What we are usually doing, because morning is the peak hour for all of us to do works, everyone will be in his room, and we will put a sheet of paper saying that we are in a meeting. If the door is closed and this paper is there, so no one is allowed to enter, because that means we are having a session. If the door is open, then you are welcome to enter the room. So again, my question is, how can I motivate myself and my students? I have to do the session, so I will do it, but I don't feel that I am giving as much as I used to do before, especially with the technology.
I have a few thoughts. This is Mike. So do you have, first a question, do you have video capability? Even one-on-one, can you do video?
Yes, I can. So when I
would encourage you to use video. I think that builds a sense of, improves the intimacy of the situation. You can see faces, and you can tell even in a small icon form whether or not someone's paying some attention. It's harder for them to be disengaged, I think, if they know you're watching and if they're seeing your face. And so that would be one bit of advice. The two other things, one is if you have an opportunity to just chat with your students outside of class, one-on-one with video conferencing, I think that could help you build that personal rapport. One of the things that all of us who have been working remotely for a long time realizes that from time to time, you have to have one-on-one conversations. usually that means going to the site where your home site, wherever that is, and just making the rounds, going from office to office and chatting. But in this setting, you can't do that, right? But I think if you had a one-on-one conversation with your students, just get to know them a little bit, they get to know you a little bit, that builds that personal connection. It might make class time more effective. The last thing I would mention is, if your students are like my kids, I have 2 boys at home who are high school age, it's just hard right now, because they're going through a tremendous amount of uncertainty. In the back of their minds is always what's really happening and what's going to happen. And I don't know, to my kids at least, that's an energy draw on them, and it distracts them from what they're doing. And I think that what you can do to support them and maybe have patience with them a little bit could also be part of the answer.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
To add to that, the question of feedback, are people following you? That's definitely a difficult one. Often if we're in a group, we'll say, does anybody have any comments? And then there's 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds of silence. Nobody has any comments. There are a couple of tools, maybe a few tools you can use for that with your students if they can get accustomed to using it. One is the chat, so you can expect all your students to respond in chat. Are you up to speed with me, or still having problems? Make sure they type in an answer, no, yes, maybe, in chat, and that they all do that. Another option is some of these tools provide a polling capability, so you can set up polling questions. You can do the same thing, obviously, in a Google Doc, as you see Ashley and Mike doing here. And then if you have all sorts of time, which none of us do, you could create a Google form ahead of time, and with multiple choice questions that then they have to follow you through and insert their answers on, and you give them a time to insert their answers and go look at what their answers are. So those are some ideas as far as getting the kind of feedback that you might need as a teacher that you don't get in this remote setting too easily.
Oh, thank you. I think the Google form, the one which you said, is gave me another thought, is that I will send them the question in advance, so that when I am explaining the paper in front of them, so that they can write, and if they have any question, maybe they can ask to me. Regarding the chat, again, they write their answer when I ask them. Sometimes a few of them will answer on the chat, but the problem that I am learning Teams with them. So when they type, they write in the chat, and I am on the video. Still, I need to find my way, how I move quickly so that I can read their chat. So what I did to them, I have them in WhatsApp group. So I said to them, please don't write on Teams, because I am giving the lecture, and I don't want to leave the video and go to the chat. So please just put your chat in WhatsApp, and it will be easy for me to to read it from the phone. So that's what they are doing. So thanks a lot.
Is it possible for you
Sure.
to actually encourage a student to be an ally of yours and help you out? So it sounds like you are responsible for doing everything. You're facilitating their learning. You're running the meeting. You are in charge of the technology. Why not try assigning different roles to your students that might encourage them to have more buy-in in the process? You could have someone monitoring the chat, much like Ashley is monitoring right now for us. And you could focus on teaching, and the students can focus on learning, and maybe you could switch roles. And so, by the way, this is something that I generalize and I use with my own meetings and my own team. So it's not just in the classroom setting, but also when you're running a meeting and you are running it remotely. We have to rely on others to help us, because there's a lot more that you're managing. So I would encourage you to think about ways that you can bring others into the process and have them also be responsible for the success of the meeting or the class.
All right. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I think this is a good idea. Actually, one of my students did a short video showing me how to call for a meeting on Teams. So I think they more will come. I mean, will help if I just ask them and give them, as you said, distribute the duties among them. So that's really a good idea. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, And a couple more things. Practicing is also good. I think, it's kind of, experimenting a little bit if you can find someone who would be a guinea pig. And the last thing I'll mention that I've used in teaching before is a tool called Kahoot, K-A-H-O.
Yeah, well, I know it. Yeah, we use it
Yeah,
to
great.
quizzes for students. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, all right.
But till now I didn't use it. So you brought this, so this is a good idea. I will use it so that to keep track with them if they are following me, if they are reading the notes. Yeah, that's a good idea as well.
Yeah, all right, good.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So the questions are still rolling in. So I hope I get this name right, but Delia Madrid, or do you have a microphone where you could ask your question?
Yes, this is Delia Madrid. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, so my question is, I'm big on team building and ensuring that there's morale amongst the team, that, everyone is respectful of our differing styles and all of that, but yet we feel connected in a certain way. So being remote away from each other, it's still continuing to run through my mind if, there's other ways of continuing with that team building atmosphere, even remotely. So any technique strategies that anyone has to recommend, and also with that, just being mindful of, everyone's differing social styles. So not everyone may want to be on a Zoom call, but yet there might be something else. So just kind of thinking outside the box in that way.
Well, it sounds like
some things
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, just real quick. Some things I've seen people trying are non-technical brief meetings, like a coffee break kind of meeting for a team, just to chat about what happened on the weekend or something like that for 15 minutes, 10 minutes. And then another way I've seen help people stay friendly and communicating in a team building way is chat channels that are, sort of the random channel, or, where anybody can post funny jokes or things like that. I think those help.
This is Noelle. Just as an example of that, our team does a 15-minute call every day at noon, and it's mostly social, and we pick a theme every day. So one day we did everyone wear their favorite hat. One day it was everyone's favorite sports jersey. One day it was bring your favorite book, just to try to increase the team building.
I think another method for team building is also to take time with the team to reflect on what's happening, and to ask each other, ask yourselves, okay, is there something that we would like to do differently? Is everybody happy with the way they were managing our team and running our team? Does anyone have any new suggestions? And that's a really good way to get people to actually have ownership of their communication and the process and what you're building.
I think other things are I like to create a team policy when I'm on a team, and that maybe sounds too formal, so maybe you call it a team vision, or what we're about kind of thing. Creative, collaboratively developing a statement of who you are. I think there's a great and it's not just having it, it's actually the process of creating it that is very helpful, right? And being able to come together and then share what, and then iterate on it, right? Come back to it in a short, sometime later, and because it does build this shared sense and build, say what are we about, right? I don't know. I found that to be very useful. I use it as on-ramping for students. I have a community policy for my students with whom I work. I expect them to take a look at it. We talk about it, and so that they know what we're about.
I've done the same thing, Mike. Whenever we do any type of planning, we create a statement about ourselves, and everybody contributes to that. And it's like an elevator statement, that one statement that characterizes what your team is about. That's really useful.
Yeah.
So I'll just add to this. It's not specifically team building, but you might think of it more like team maintenance in a sense, though. Like Catherine, I found that I actually miss a lot of the interruptions at work, a lot of the hallway chat, people you run into that sort of just spontaneous interactions that you have. Number one, it allows you to keep your pulse on what's going on in the organization, what the priorities are, if things are changing and so forth. But obviously there's a social aspect to it. So I've tried now on probably 4 or 5 occasions to sort of do a virtual hallway chat. I basically just open up my WebEx chat, my WebEx meeting room, and I let people know I'm going to be in it at such and such a time. On Mondays and Thursdays are typically when I do this. And then whoever wants to join in the hallway that I actually work on in Building 111 is welcome to. And we've done that a few times now, check in with each other, just see how people are doing given the challenging situations we're all facing. And I'm learning more about my coworkers than I might ordinarily, just because of learning about the challenges and so forth. So it's more like team maintenance, but it is a way to use the technology to kind of engage and be social, even though we're physically distant from each other.
All right, we'll move to the next question. Dave Hopkins, do you have a microphone?
Yes, I do. My question concerns, well, I'll tell my situation. I have daily meetings with a very small group. And when we were doing this in person, we would go through our agenda and then go off and do the things that we had planned on doing for that day. But I'm finding as we are doing telecommuting and working remotely, when we have our meetings, they tend to go on longer, and we just sit around talking about general things. And it's like a phone call with your relatives. You never know how to hang up. I don't know. I think this is good. I get the feeling that it's kind of substituting our our face-to-face meetings with a different way of communication. So my question is this good? Is it, I'm one who, I don't want to spend too much time just talking because we've got work to do, but by the same token, how do you balance that?
It does sound to me like you're successfully blending both some business and some pleasure. It's interesting to hear you say that, because I've been involved with doing remote telecoms for a long time, where when I'm leading them, I'm very conscious of the clock because I have so many of them, and many of my collaborators have meetings that start back to back. So when I'm leading a meeting, I am very conscious of ending on time. But I realize in your circumstance, it's kind of a different thing. Maybe being more intentional about defining some of these team building type exercises at separate times or in a well-defined part of your meeting could help to clarify that you don't want to ramble on, every single day for extra time. Just a thought.
I'd like to really echo what Lois said about watching the clock, and the way that I like to end meetings. Well, I guess I should say I like to end meetings by doing a recap right about 15 minutes in. And if we're going to run over, I'll ask the team, can you run over? And we agree whether we can or not. But what's really important to me in teams is making sure that we've achieved our objectives and that we are moving forward. And so a lot of running meetings, whether they are, I would say, structured or whether they're organic, is really about guiding the conversation so that at the end of the meeting, everybody's happy with the result. And people are usually happy with the result at the end of a meeting if they feel that they have accomplished something, or if they feel that they've had a chance to be heard. And so you can blend those, like Lois is saying. Sounds like you're doing a great job of that. And just check in about 20 minutes in, say, okay, we've got 20 more minutes. We're going to end our conversation soon. Do we still need to do anything that we said we were going to do that we haven't gotten to yet?
Yeah, this is Mike Bernhardt. Part of what we might be experiencing in that is that some of these people just need someone to talk to. We've noticed that on a couple of the calls I've had recently where, you don't have those office conversations anymore. You don't really have the colleagues around. And the casual conversations just kind of work their way in naturally, where people just really want to talk a little bit You know, it might be a single parent that's home. It might be someone who has children at home and doesn't have a chance to have the adult conversations that they normally would in the workspace. So my suggestion would be to allocate a little bit of extra time and kind of take that into consideration, or as someone else suggested earlier, set up some special times where you just get together with the team and chat and catch up with how everybody's doing.
Great suggestions. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, moving to the next question. One I'm very interested in the answer to because I have a new person starting Monday myself. So Camille, if you have a microphone, can you ask your question? All right. I'm not sure if Camille is having, let's see, I see her.
I'm just able to unmute. Okay.
There she is.
Perfect. Okay.
There she is. Great.
So, hi everybody. This is a really interesting conversation. My question is about potentially summer REUs, but it not only is limited to those short-term new people to your groups, but are there any tips and tricks for onboarding new team members who are new to your research, are new to remote working, and just may not necessarily be with your group for a very long time? Some of the tips that you've already shared have been really useful, but other tips are welcome here.
So this is my crew. So I work with students a lot and work remotely with them. Often, mostly because I travel a lot, but I have found things like onboard checklist. I have a master, so I do this all in GitHub. I use a project board that I structure as a Kanban board. So, you know, to do, you know, in progress, done, in other columns you can add. But I keep a master initiation checklist. And then what I do is I make a copy of that checklist and make an issue, a GitHub issue with it. And it's truly a checklist. You can click on the items. I think Catherine was mentioning how nice it is to be able to click on something when you're done. That mouse click, right, is real, or a tap or whatever it is. And so I give them that, I sit down with them, I take that master checklist and I say, okay, you know, these items aren't appropriate or needed by you, but here these are. And let's see, your particular research effort is going to be in this direction. Here's some papers that you should go read, a YouTube video, a Udacity course that you could start. And then I create that checklist, and then they hit the ground running with that, and they make tremendous progress. In fact, I just have a few new students I'm on-ramping this way right now. They're doing remote learning. They love it because they have something other than schoolwork to do, and it's self-guided. And so I would strongly recommend something like that as a technique. And then regularly meeting, of course, but that tangible checklist with achievable items, I have found to be incredibly compelling. Students love it.
For me, it would be to use video to talk to them on a regular basis as much as possible. Sometimes I've found that students will be shy until you kind of say, well, I need you to use the video. But many times they'll tell me they understand something and they really just don't. And if I could see their face, I would know that. And, you know, I could explain it more deeply. So that has helped me.
And along the line with the video that Catherine mentioned, I also try to convey to my students that, you know, if you can't find a perfect, you know, 6-foot patch of your wall that you can show to everybody, it's okay. If you can't find the quietest spot in the house where there are no distractions, it's okay. We're all in this together. We're all, you know, we all feel a bit exposed, but it's okay. And to get comfortable with that, I think, is part of it too. Part of it is to clean up your office, which I did, right? But part of it is just to be comfortable with where you are.
Right, that's a good point. And maybe emailing them in advance that you would like to use video so that they can feel more comfortable and maybe clean up what's behind them. Yeah, that's a good point.
Is there any way that you would recommend, I mean, there are a couple of good suggestions here with the hallway meetings and the lunch meetings or social gatherings, but ways to sort of showcase the culture of your group that students pick up by being there in person, but probably will not be able to capture by working remotely.
That's a super interesting question. That was a subject of research that I did about 15 years ago. And we were trying to replicate a cocktail party online, in the sense that when you go to a cocktail party, for example, you might walk around the room, you don't really know anyone, you might feel a little uncomfortable. And so how do you break those barriers? Well, it may start with icebreakers, and also looking at the contextual cultural cues. And so if you're thinking about how can you, in a virtual environment, demonstrate the culture of your team or your organization, a lot of it might be by things that you hang online. So if you have websites or web pages or virtual tours, stories, pictures of team members in the context of hobbies or in their daily life, things that will give individuals something to talk about other than work. Because to make that first leap to say something to someone, there has to be an icebreaker. And so think about certain types of artifacts that you can put online that will serve as icebreakers, that will help people to determine and understand the commonalities that exist among them. That might be one way to start.
Another thought that comes to my mind is our teenagers are figuring this out, how to build social community in a distributed environment. I have become inspired by my two sons who do a lot of online distributed gaming. And so I for years, I've purchased Steam games. I finally got my own Steam account, which is essentially a storefront for distributed gaming, distributed games. I learned how to use Discord, which is an audio app, for collaboration. And this age group, if they're learning this way, if they're playing this way, they have ways, and we can actually learn from them how to do social events. So I now play with my adult daughters who are remote from the Stardew Valley. It's a collaborative game. It's just fun. There's a little bit of kind of quirky humor in it that's adult-like, but otherwise it's just a fun game that you can play together. You just get on Discord, you can talk. At the same time, you can play the game, and it's just fun. I don't know, maybe there's something in there we can migrate into the office environment. I don't know, but this generation of kids, unlike early games, which are kind of one-on-one, you were shutting the rest of the world out. Games today are about collaboration and interacting and solving problems together. And I think we can look to them for some assistance in this area.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. Amit, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great.
All right, so I just wanted to quickly ask, so Catherine briefly touched on aspect of missing hallway chats, and then Mark kind of gave us an idea that he opens up his WebEx portal to have people come in, join at random times. But then who do you inform? How do you inform? I mean, these are hallway meetings are random. So how do you mimic that in virtual environment?
Well, so yeah, it's not random. I agreed to do 2 of these for a half hour in length, one on Monday at noon from 12 to 12:30, and another one on Thursday in the afternoon about 4 to 4:30. And basically I know all the people down my hallway, I know their email addresses. So I basically sent them all an invitation to join me at those times. And they're welcome to. My goal is to try to be in my room, essentially have started that virtual meeting. So it's nowhere near as spontaneous as you would get if you were really at work. but it's a decent approximation, I think. There are other teams that I think actually will, during their entire workday, have everyone on their team will have their WebEx room running and headset on or whatever, and then people pop into those rooms at random moments during the day to ask them questions. And maybe that's a way to operate as well. That is even more spontaneous. But I just schedule 2 half-hour times, and we shut it down in a half hour, and there's no agenda. There's just checking in, you know, what's the news, you know, different funny stories, whatever. It's mainly just to socialize. But I'll say this, you know, that is an aspect to work that I think we all have, that I think actually contributes to our productivity at work. It contributes to our ability to work together and be productive. And so the notion that spending time doing that is, quote, not getting work done, I think is potentially faulty. It's part of our ability to get our work done.
Thank you.
All right, there's just a few questions left. And so Lisa, you asked about office gear. Are you still online and have a microphone? Let me see. All right, I don't see Lisa on the phone anymore, so I'll just go ahead and ask her question because others might be wondering it too. And so one of the panelists mentioned ergonomics, and she was wondering if there are any recommendations for good office chairs on anywhere online shopping is available. But maybe more importantly, is any other office gear that you really like or use every day?
This is Lois. I don't have a recommendation for a specific chair or desk, but I will say that my lab, Argonne, has a department of people who can help with ergonomics, and I would imagine that many organizations do. So I would encourage all of us who have such organizations to check with them because they might have suggestions. One thing that I would like a recommendation for, if anyone knows, is good Bluetooth earphones that are comfortable. I've determined that my ears are a weird configuration, so every single one I've tried I don't like. So recommendations welcome there. Thank you.
Yeah, I like the earbuds too. I like because I only need to have one in and I can still hear around me, and this collar thing is very convenient. I also have one of these. It's a little mini tripod that can hold an iPhone, and so I can have a meeting and see what's on my iPhone, and hold it up as a camera. So that's another nice thing. I like my Herman Miller Aeron chair. I would highly recommend one of those. They're pricey, but boy, it's every penny is worth it if for saving your posture.
So this is Mark. When Catherine's talking, I believe she's actually standing. She's probably the only one of us that's standing. And that's probably because she has a sit-stand desk, which is great. I have one, and to be honest, it's been in a seated position for too long. I need to put it in the upright position, but it's invaluable. I got it on Amazon. There are other places you can get them. So yeah, sit-stand desk is really super.
I concur. Yeah, I am amazed that by the end of the day, when I am standing, I have much more energy than I do when I sit all day. And I thought the opposite would be true. So yeah, I highly recommend it. And ergonomic keyboards and mouse as well.
And to reemphasize what Catherine said about walking, I often, every day I have a bunch of meetings, but I can have one or two that are where I don't need to be in front of a screen, and I just get up and go walking. And it's just great. It helps me focus. I get my steps in. It's really, so that's one thing to try to take advantage of. I would say even when you get back to the office, if you go back to the office, get walking while you're talking is a great habit.
All right, well, I think there are two final questions that I see here. The first one is from Carolyn about OUO data. Carolyn, are you still on the phone? All right. I don't see Carolyn. So I'll go ahead and ask her question. How do you handle the occasional need to write something down on paper that might be OUO or business sensitive or otherwise restricted but not classified? I'm used to having a paper notebook that I keep at work for this purpose. What do I do with that paper after I'm finished?
Yeah.
I'm Alveston 1. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Carolyn. Sorry about
Hi.
that. Thank you.
I unmuted. So it's kind of like I'm used to having a big whiteboard I can do something in or draw in my notebook, but it's OUO. So I mean, shred it or what?
My advice, as I went to this years ago, is I just don't write anything down on a sheet of paper like that. I use my laptop, which is, you know, my employer's, and it's appropriate to use it for that kind of information, and that way it never leaves my laptop.
So that means that it would be very useful for me to have a whiteboard that I could do architectural diagrams on.
Sure, I suppose, and you know, as always, I guess just make sure with your information security person, you know, what's appropriate or not. But yeah, that's why I went to all digital with anything like that, so I didn't have to worry about that kind of concern.
Okay.
In addition, our organization uses Microsoft Teams, and if you do something digitally that you need to share with somebody, you can upload the files of any kind to your team members and interact with them as well. They also have a wiki if you need to just jot down notes that you want to keep for reference in the later point. And we're finding that very helpful in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted something handwritten for pictures.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a whiteboard.
All right. I think we have one final question, unless I've missed something. But Noel, I think a lot of folks would be very interested in this question because I think we've all used them the last few days. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask this question if you're still with us?
Yeah, I run a consortium of a national lab in 4 universities, and so there's a plethora of different tools that they're using, and I am in a position where I get to pick one that works for my team, not just for managing my team, but also for the major events that we hold, like major workshops, major seminar series and panels of like 400 people. So I was wondering if anyone's seen a good website comparing all of the different software tools, including the functionality, so we can make sure it works for us before we go purchase it or start rolling it out widespread.
So I think we've all used a variety of things: WebEx, BlueJeans, Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams. We're using Zoom right now. There are other platforms I know too. I know, for example, in the Exascale project, we're switching away from BlueJeans. Not for it, the Oak Ridge that hosted it, the site for us is moving away from BlueJeans to Microsoft Teams. So we had to pick something. We're poised to get a bunch of copies of Zoom. It seems to offer, for our purposes at least, a lot of the nice features. You know, the fact that you can do breakout rooms, it can support several hundred up to 1,000 people. You can do screen sharing, remote keyboard, mouse, that kind of thing. A lot of nice features, but there are a lot of good tools out there.
Yeah, I will say there's an awful lot of complexity in navigating this set of features and tools, and simply even understanding what the verbiage is used among the tools. So, you know, the different concepts of sharing, whether it's a shared screen versus a shared whiteboard versus shared annotations, and And so that is difficult to navigate. There are certainly a number, obviously recently, a number of people have posted content related to this. And people who are trying to develop content for the Better Scientific Software site are also trying to either curate some of those links or even sort of get basically curate links to a lot of that information. And we started down that path. I did post a link for a draft of what we're trying to produce on the Better Scientific Software site in the Google Docs for those that are interested. A lot of work to fill all those questions in. So we will do our best, but nonetheless, Google searches should produce a lot of very useful resources, especially if you restrict them to within the last month or two. There's been a lot of authors, I think, publishing on this topic.
All right. I believe we have tackled all of the questions in the Google Doc. Thank you everyone very much for putting them there rather than in chat. That made it a lot easier to be able to ask. I will say, just in case I missed anything, if someone would like to raise their hand and ask any final questions, if we have time, panelists, I know we're running 2 minutes over.
It's okay, yeah.
Okay. All right, any final questions? All right, very good. Well, I think that hits it. And as Mark said, we'll continue to fill out this Google Doc, and it will be archived with the video and the slides from this event on the page that we sent you in the email. I believe all registered attendees will also get the information once everything has been posted. We'll push a note out. I will turn it back to Mike, and thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ashley. This has been a great help. Well, thanks to all the panelists, and it seems like we've had overall a good hour and a half. So we're ready to call it an afternoon and call it a week. And I hope we'll all have a good weekend, get some rest and relaxation. So we will be posting this recording. Ashley will, I think, will be sending out information so you can go back to certain sections. We'll also try to annotate it a bit. So, certain themes that came up, we can point you right to that spot in the recording and move along. So thank you, everybody. Thanks to panelists very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.